Hello children and happy Sunday again. I hope you had an amazing first week at school. I hope your week was as fantastic as we all expect. So guess what? This week we'll be learning about Joshua and his men. Still on the warfare series. My identity. I am fearfully made. I am wonderfully made. I know my identity. I am a child of God. I am creative and full of ideas. I am not a slave to fear. I am bold. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I am a soldier in the Lord's army. Now, what did we learn last week about praise? About praise, we learned that praise is the act of saying sweet things about God. When are we to praise? We are to praise God in all circumstances, in the good, in the bad, and in the ugly. How are we to praise God? We praise God in prayers, in songs, and in lifting and clapping of hands, in thoughts, and even by our actions. Where do we praise God? Anywhere. At home, at church, at school, in the car, at the markets. You can praise God anywhere. Why is praise important? Praise is important because God commands it. Praise calms us down and makes us less anxious. God's promise. Now, our story today is taken from the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 1 to 20. The Bible story is about Joshua, his men, and the battle of Jericho. It shows how God keeps his promises and provides help for his people when they face a terrible situation. the promised land. A long time ago, God promised the Israelites that he would lead them to the promised land after they left Egypt. The Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. Can you believe that? A journey that was meant to take 40 days took 40 years. Interesting. Moses handed over the leadership of the Israelites to Joshua before he died. They finally got to the promised land, but were unable to settle down because it was not theirs yet. The people of Jericho lived in the promised land. The battle for Jericho. Joshua and his men would have to battle for Jericho. Their first battle for the land was against the gateway city of Jericho. The people of Jericho had heard all about the Israelites, so they tightly shut up their city. The city gates of Jericho were securely barred, and no one went in or out of the city. That must have been really tough. The Israelites were camped nearby, hoping to gain entrance one day. God speaks to Joshua. One sunny day, the Lord told Joshua that he had handed Jericho, its king and its fighting men, to Joshua and his men. He then instructed him to do the following. 1. For 6 days, march once around the city with all the armed men. 2. Have 7 priests with ram's horns. Have 7 priests with ram's horn trumpets lead the way. 3. Then, on the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing the trumpets. 4. When they sound a long blast and the army shouts, the walls of the city will collapse. I'm sure they were very, very scared. Joshua instructed the priests to get the Ark of the Covenant ready and choose 7 priests to lead the way carrying trumpets. On day 1, the priests blow their horns. Joshua gave orders for the priests with trumpets to set off around the city, followed by armed men. The priests set off sounding their trumpets, but the army had orders to remain quiet. Can you imagine if you were one of the soldiers? How would you have felt? Marching behind a group of musicians quietly around a very, very big wall? Day 2, they march around the city. The priests carried the Ark of the Covenant around the city with an armed guard in front and behind it. After one circuit of the city, they all returned to the camp. Day 3, 4, and 5, they marched round the city. The priests marched around the city carrying the Ark of the Covenant with an armed guard in front and behind following them. Then the men returned to the camp. They did all of these things they did for 6 days. Jericho is confused. Of course, if you were living in Jericho at that time, you would have been as puzzled as the people of Jericho. The puzzled people of Jericho watched as the Israelites repeated their march around the city wall 6 days in a row. I'm sure they were confused. I'm sure they thought, what are these people doing? What are they up to? How would you sing round a large wall and think that would win a battle? Let's read on. Day 7, they increased their praise. On the 7th day, they set off at daybreak and marched around the city walls 7 times. The 7 priests led the way, blowing their ram's horn trumpets. While all of this was going on, the people of Jericho watched as the priests and army marched around their city 7 times in a row. At the end of the 7th lap, when the priest sounded a long blast on their trumpets, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout! For the Lord has given you the city." Only Rahab and her family are to be spared. No one is to take anything belonging to the people of Jericho, because it all belongs to the Lord. When the trumpets blasted and the army shouted, the walls of the city collapsed. What? I can't imagine how the people of Jericho felt. The army charged in over the ruins and took the city. The army was forbidden to loot anything they found in the city, as everything was devoted to God. They were warned that looting would bring trouble on them and the whole camp. So that means the army had to leave all the nice silver and gold that they came across. They had to leave everything because everything was to be taken to the house of God. Rahab was saved. Joshua ordered the 2 spies to find Rahab's house, marked with a scarlet cord, in the window, and led her and her family to safety. From that day on, they lived with the Israelites. The items made of gold, silver, bronze, and iron were carried out of the city and put in the treasury of the Lord. The city was then set on fire. News of this amazing victory soon spread, and people knew that the Lord was with Joshua. Now, let's sing a song. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. Now you're going to stamp your feet when you say the flat. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. The children of God were praising the Lord. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. Make sure you repeat this song so that you remember the story of the walls of Jericho and how Joshua and his army were able to triumph at Jericho. Now, questions. Who told Joshua how to win the Battle of Jericho? Can you guess? Yes, the Lord appeared to Joshua. Why was Jericho so hard to fight? A strong wall surrounded the city. That was why Jericho was so hard to get in and fight. How many days did the Israelites march around Jericho? Was it 2 days? 4 days? 10 days? I'm sure you know, it was 7 days. On the 7th day, what did the Israelites do? The Israelites marched around 7 times, blew their trumpets, and shouted. What happened to the walls of Jericho? The walls of Jericho fell down flat. What did the Israelites do with the riches from Jericho? They put all the riches from Jericho in a treasury of the tabernacle of the Lord. Who saved the city of Jericho? Rahab and her family. Now, our memory verse for today is taken from the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 24. We will serve the Lord our God, we will obey him. Let's say that again. Joshua chapter 24, verse 24. We will serve the Lord our God, we will obey him. Okay, children, I hope, I believe, I know that you enjoyed today's lesson on Joshua and his men. I wish you a sweet week as we go on in this week. Have an amazing time at school. Make sure you remember to praise God at every circumstances, every chance you get. Remember to praise God. Remember to listen out for God's instructions, just like Joshua had listened. Have a great week. I remain Auntie Adeswa. Bye.
The Faithful Hall of Fame, Joshua. This is Joshua.
Oh, hey.
Joshua was the leader of the Israelites, who God used to bring his people to the Promised Land.
Yeah, let's do this.
When God told Joshua it was time to take the Promised Land, Joshua sent spies into the city of Jericho. While those spies were in Jericho,
Come on!
they were protected by a woman named Rahab. spies promised to spare Rahab and her family when they took back the land.
Yay!
And she hung a scarlet cord from her window to remind them of their promise.
See you soon!
Now the Israelites had crossed the Jordan and were camped near the town of Jericho.
Hey!
Hello.
One day, Joshua looked up,
Huh?
and there was a man standing before him.
Hello.
The man said, "I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua asked what the man wanted to tell him, and the Lord said he wanted Joshua to take the city of Jericho,
All right.
but that Joshua needed to follow his instructions exactly.
You got it.
Jericho was shut for fear of the Israelites.
And went home? Yeah, well.
No one came out and no one came in. So the Lord told Joshua to gather his soldiers and march around the city for 6 days.
Mark.
The priests were to take the Ark of the Covenant, and 7 priests were to go in front of it, blowing a ram's horn. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times and blow the horn. Then all the people of Israel were to give a great shout,
Then what?
and then the city walls would fall.
Whoa! Yeah, let's do it.
So Joshua said, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And the people did shout. And the walls did fall.
Let's go!
The Israelites overtook the city of Jericho as God had commanded.
Rahab.
They remembered Rahab because of her faithfulness. Joshua was faithful in carrying out God's commands, and the Israelites took many other cities as God told them they would.
Oh, nice.
For God will never fail to fulfill his promises. So the Israelites came to live in the land that God had promised Abraham, Isaac, Israel, Joseph, and Moses many years ago.